Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's story is one of those moments that reminds us never to judge someone by their job, their clothes, or the car they drive. Because sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one with the most extraordinary story. And today's story begins in the shining glass headquarters of one of the largest automotive tech companies in the country. Every morning the building woke up before the sun. Security guards clocked in, lights flickered on across the massive lobby, and the smell of fresh coffee drifted from the employee cafe. Executives in expensive suits would begin arriving one by one, their luxury cars sliding into the underground parking garage like a parade of status symbols. But before most of them arrived, there was always one man already there. His name was Marcus. Marcus wore the same dark blue janitor uniform every day. Quiet, calm, always moving with a slow, steady rhythm as he cleaned hallways, polished floors, and emptied trash cans. Most employees barely noticed him. A few nodded politely. Many walked past him like he was part of the building itself. But Marcus didn't seem to mind that. Every morning at exactly 6:15, after parking his car in the far corner of the lot, he would walk into the building carrying an old metal lunchbox. He greeted the security guard, started his shift, and worked quietly through the enormous building. And every single day he parked the same car. A faded, dusty 1967 Mustang. The paint was worn. The body had a few scratches. And from the outside, to most people, it looked like nothing more than an old piece of junk that had somehow survived the last 50 years. But Marcus treated that car differently. After his shift ended each day, he would walk out to the parking lot, pull a cloth from his pocket, and slowly wipe the dust from the Mustang's hood like someone polishing a priceless treasure. Most people didn't understand why. Until the day the CEO noticed it. That morning the company's powerful CEO, Richard Langford, arrived in his brand new electric supercar worth nearly $500,000. Richard was known throughout the company for being brilliant, ruthless, and brutally honest. He had built the company into a multi-billion-dollar automotive empire. Investors loved him. Competitors feared him. Employees respected him. But many also feared his arrogance. Richard stepped out of his car wearing a tailored black suit and sunglasses. Several executives followed him as they walked across the parking lot toward the elevator. Then he stopped. His eyes landed on the old Mustang parked alone at the edge of the lot. Marcus was standing beside it, wiping dust from the hood. Richard laughed. Not a quiet chuckle. A loud, mocking laugh that echoed across the concrete garage. "Who's driving that junk?" he asked. One of the managers glanced over. I think the janitor, sir." Marcus. Richard shook his head and walked toward the car like someone inspecting a museum exhibit of failure. Marcus looked up politely. "Morning, sir." Richard circled the Mustang slowly. "That thing still runs?" he said with a smirk. Marcus smiled gently. "Yes, sir. Runs just fine." Richard tapped the rusty fender with his finger. "I'm amazed it hasn't fallen apart yet. Looks like something from a scrapyard." The executives behind him laughed nervously. Marcus didn't react. He simply folded the cloth and placed it in his pocket. Richard leaned closer to the engine hood. "What's under there anyway?" "A dying lawnmower." More laughter. Marcus looked at him calmly. "Just an engine I've been working on for a while." Richard shook his head. "You know, this company builds some of the most advanced engines in the world. Billions of dollars in research. Thousands of engineers." He paused. "And you're out here polishing this antique?" Marcus simply nodded. Richard straightened his suit. "Well, keep dreaming," he said. "Maybe one day that junk will make it around the block." The group walked away laughing as they headed into the elevator. Marcus stood quietly beside the Mustang. Then he opened the hood. And smiled. Because what sat inside that engine bay was something nobody in that parking lot could have imagined. Something that had taken him 15 years to build. Something that was about to change everything. Later that morning the entire company gathered in the main auditorium. Investors, engineers, executives, media representatives. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement. Richard Langford stood on stage preparing to present the company's newest breakthrough engine technology. A project the company had spent 8 years developing. The promise was huge. A revolutionary engine system expected to be worth nearly $2 billion in future contracts. Slides flashed across the giant screen as Richard spoke confidently. "This engine will redefine efficiency, power, and performance for the next generation of vehicles." Applause filled the room. But then something unexpected happened. One of the engineers rushed onto the stage and whispered something in Richard's ear. Richard frowned. What do you mean it's not starting? A quiet tension spread through the room. The demonstration engine that was supposed to power up during the presentation wasn't responding. Engineers hurried backstage. Computers were checked. Wiring inspected. Software restarted. Nothing worked. The audience began murmuring. Investors exchanged concerned glances. Richard's confidence started to fade. This presentation was supposed to secure billions in funding. And the engine wouldn't even start. Back in the hallway outside the auditorium, Marcus pushed a cleaning cart slowly past the door. He paused when he heard the commotion. Two engineers were arguing in frustration. The combustion control isn't syncing. We've reset everything. Marcus listened quietly. Then he spoke gently. Excuse me. I might know what the problem is. The engineers looked at him like he had just spoken another language. One of them scoffed. It's a prototype hybrid engine system. You wouldn't understand. Marcus shrugged. Maybe not. But if the control timing is slightly off, it could block ignition completely. The engineers froze. Because that was exactly what they had been struggling with. How would you know that? One asked suspiciously. Marcus wiped his hands on a rag. Just a guess. Inside the auditorium, Richard was growing impatient. What's taking so long? He demanded. One engineer walked onto the stage nervously. Sir, the engine system has a synchronization issue. Richard slammed his hand against the podium. We've spent 8 years on this. Then the engineer hesitated. There's someone outside who thinks he might know what the issue is. Richard rolled his eyes. Who? The engineer cleared his throat. The janitor. The room went silent. Richard stared at him. You're joking. He described the exact failure point. Richard sighed heavily. Fine. Bring him in. At this point I'll listen to anyone. A few minutes later Marcus quietly walked onto the stage. Still wearing his janitor uniform. Hundreds of people stared at him. Richard crossed his arms. Well? What's your brilliant diagnosis? Marcus examined the engine console calmly. His eyes moved across the control display. Then he pointed at one setting. This sequence is locking the ignition cycle. One of the engineers checked. His eyes widened. He's right. Marcus adjusted the setting slightly. Then stepped back. Try now. The engineer pressed the ignition command. For a second nothing happened. Then the engine roared to life. The sound filled the auditorium. Powerful. Smooth. Perfectly balanced. The crowd burst into applause. Richard stared at Marcus in shock. How did you know that? Marcus hesitated. Then he said quietly, because I designed a similar system a long time ago. The room went silent again. Richard frowned. Designed? Marcus nodded. Before I worked here. Richard stepped closer. What exactly did you do before becoming a janitor? Marcus looked toward the audience. Then back at the engine. I used to be an engine designer. Whispers filled the auditorium. One of the senior engineers suddenly stepped forward slowly. His face pale. Wait. Marcus. Marcus Hayes? Marcus looked at him and smiled slightly. The engineer gasped. You're the guy who designed the adaptive combustion model 15 years ago. The audience murmured louder. Because that model had become one of the most influential designs in modern engine development. Richard stared in disbelief. If that's true, why are you working here as a janitor? Marcus took a slow breath. Because sometimes life takes turns you don't expect. He explained quietly how years ago he had developed a revolutionary engine concept. But investors had rejected it. His small startup collapsed. Debts piled up. His wife became ill. Medical bills consumed everything. So he took whatever job he could find. Including cleaning floors. Richard looked stunned. And the Mustang? Marcus smiled. I never stopped working on the engine. The room was completely silent now. Richard remembered mocking the car that morning. Calling it junk. Marcus looked at him calmly. That car isn't junk, he said softly. It's the only prototype of the engine I built. Richard's voice dropped. What engine? Marcus paused. The one I believe is worth $2 billion. The audience gasped. Because Marcus then revealed something incredible. The engine in his Mustang produced double the efficiency of modern hybrid systems. With zero combustion waste. A breakthrough many companies had been chasing for years. Richard stared at him like he was seeing a ghost. You're telling me, the future engine of this company, Marcus nodded, is sitting in the parking lot. 10 minutes later the entire executive team stood Around the old Mustang, Richard slowly walked around the car again. This time he wasn't laughing. Marcus opened the hood. Engineers leaned forward in amazement. The design was brilliant, elegant, far beyond anything they expected from an old car. One engineer whispered, "This could change the entire industry." Richard looked at Marcus, the janitor he had mocked that very morning. Then he said quietly, "Start the engine." Marcus turned the key. The Mustang roared to life. But it wasn't the loud roar of an old muscle car. It was smooth, powerful, almost futuristic. The engineers exchanged stunned looks. Richard stepped back slowly. Because in that moment he realized something that hit harder than any business loss. The man he had laughed at was a genius. And the junk car he mocked might power the next $2 billion revolution. Marcus closed the hood gently. And the parking garage fell completely silent. Sometimes the greatest innovations aren't created in billion-dollar laboratories. Sometimes they're built quietly in a garage, by someone the world stopped noticing. And that's why you should never judge someone by their job title, because the janitor you walk past today might be the genius who changes the world tomorrow.